Welcome to another edition of MCAT Strategy. Today we will be doing verbal reasoning, active strategies, hot or not. Today's video will serve two purposes. The first purpose is to present you with the various strategies that are out there and that people utilize. And the second part is to tell you or give you my personal opinion of their effectiveness and their usefulness. Of course, the hot or not rating is my personal opinion from personal experience and from observing other people who have used these strategies in the past. So you can go ahead, and even though I may not like a strategy, I still present it and put it out there for you, and you are still welcome to try it for yourself and see whether it works for you, because like I said in a previous video, just because a strategy doesn't work for me personally doesn't mean that it will not work for you. So you can make the final judgment call as to whether or not you use the strategies. The most basic active strategy, of course, is writing down the main idea of the passage in a sentence or two, as well as the author's stance. This strategy is definitely hot. The main idea is so important for answering almost all of the questions, so writing down the main idea and the author's stance, in my opinion, is a must. And that's why you will find this as a component of many people's personalized strategies, and it is pretty much widely and universally used. Just a quick note, of course you can use the spectrum technique for the author's stance, which I covered in one of my previous videos. One strategy that relates to timing the verbal reasoning passages is writing down the time on a piece of paper for when you have to stop working on the passage, guess, and move on. This strategy, I think, is hot because the timing of the verbal reasoning passages is very important. There are two primary schools of thought when it comes to verbal reasoning timing. One school says that flexible timing should be emphasized because different passages will take you different times to complete, and you need to be flexible with that. However, when I have practiced in the past, I have found that a flexible plan does not work as well for me because I end up taking more time than I should on a passage, and that leaves me without enough time to finish the rest of the passages. So over time I shifted to a more rigid and disciplined way of timing. I write down the amount of time that I have for each passage at the beginning of the passage, and when the time approaches, I know that I must be quick and make educated guesses on the rest of the questions and move on. I force myself to be extremely disciplined. When the time comes when I have to stop working on the passage, I just fire out the guesses, my educated guesses of course, and I force myself to move on. Because I think that if you allow flexibility, then you will give yourself, an extra 10 seconds here on this passage, an extra 15 seconds here, and so on and so forth, and in the end you'll end up with a deficit on your last passage and be rushed for time. So I definitely have a much more rigid structure to my timing. When time is up, I just stop and I force myself to move on to the next passage, and I find this helps to keep my timing more consistent, because if I go by my gut and allow myself to be flexible with my timing, I find that I often run into time problems and I often shortchange the last passage. So the way I saw it back then was that a doctor requires the ability to make the right decisions under suboptimal conditions. You may want to spend more time on the particular passage because you're not done one or two questions and you know that you can get it, but the fact is that verbal reasoning timing is very tight, and you need to be disciplined, and you have to make the right decision and move on to the next passage. One strategy that a lot of prep courses seem to use is ranking passages in terms of difficulty. The idea behind this strategy is that you should do the easier passages first before the more difficult ones to increase your yield on the easy questions and maximize return from those. I am going to have to put this strategy in the not category. As I've been preaching all along, the MCAT verbal reasoning section is very tight for time, so it requires time to rank the passages in terms of difficulty and decide on the order of attack, and that is using time that is already precious, and I don't feel that it is an effective use of the time. And then you start to run into problems of difficulty gauging the passage's difficulty. You have to make enough decisions in the MCAT as it is, and sometimes it is very difficult to gauge the difficulty of a passage. Then there's the psychological impact that it may have. If you look at all the passages and start ranking them, what happens if you find more difficult passages than you expected? Then that would adversely affect you from the get-go, because you have been surprised by an increased number of difficult passages. If you are intimidated at the start of the verbal reasoning section already just because you rank the passages, then you give up a psychological advantage. You already go in knowing that there are passages that you won't be able to do, and with verbal reasoning you can't do that, because I think that a big part of doing well on verbal reasoning is confidence, and if you are not confident from the get-go, then you will not do as well as you want to. The other problem is that the passage and question difficulties may not be congruent. You could have hard passages with easier types of questions, and conversely, you can have easy passages to read, but the questions that are presented are very difficult. And when you rank the passages and leave the hard passages later, then you may be giving up those easy questions, which are easy points, if you just read the passage or spent more time reading the passage. So the questions being easier may negate the problem with the passage being more difficult to read, and that is very difficult to gauge when you're initially ranking the passages. The opinions expressed in this video are my own personal opinions, and you are welcome to try the strategies and see for yourself as to whether or not you agree with me. I will be making more strategy videos, and that should be coming shortly in the future. So please rate, comment, and subscribe. Any comments left below, I'll do my best to respond to them. Until next time, keep on practicing. This is MCAT Strategy, logging off.